They called me legacy that needed to be cleaned up. I didn't argue. I just activated a piece of code they never knew existed. 3 days later, their entire $80 million operation chain ground to a halt because I was the only one who held the legal licensing authority. And now I'm sipping coffee in my new office, with glass doors, with an ocean view, and without Matt. My name is Erin Gallagher. 41 years old, divorced, no kids. And until recently, the director of legal compliance at Nuvatech Dynamics, a mid-sized biotechnology firm headquartered in Minneapolis with satellite offices in 3 states and distribution channels in 12 countries. My job was simple: make sure that every product, process, and procedure followed the labyrinthine regulations that govern the biotech industry. Not glamorous work, but critical. Or at least, I thought it was critical. It was a Thursday afternoon in late October when my life changed. Minnesota's autumn had painted the trees outside my window in brilliant oranges and reds, a stark contrast to the sterile white and gray of our laboratory facilities. I was updating our quarterly compliance checklist, a tedious but necessary task that involved cross-referencing hundreds of regulatory standards against our current operational protocols. My coffee had gone cold, and I was contemplating whether it was worth getting up for a fresh cup when my computer chimed with a meeting notification. Mandatory strategy alignment operational restructuring. The meeting was scheduled to start in 5 minutes. No agenda, no pre-reading materials, just a Zoom link and the name of the host, Matthew Delaney. I didn't know Matt well. He'd been hired about 3 months prior as some kind of efficiency consultant, young, ambitious, with that particular brand of confidence that comes from an MBA and not enough real-world experience to temper it. I'd seen him around the office, always in motion, always talking about streamlining and optimization frameworks, the kind of person who uses leverage as a verb without irony. With a sigh, I saved my work and clicked the meeting link. The familiar blue loading screen appeared, and within seconds, I was staring at Matthew Delaney's perfectly coiffed hair and blindingly white smile. "Erin, thanks for joining on such short notice," he said, his voice carrying that practiced enthusiasm that immediately put me on edge. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything crucial." "Just quarterly compliance updates," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What can I help you with, Matt?" His smile widened slightly. "Well, I wanted to touch base with you directly before our town hall next week. As you know, I've been conducting a comprehensive review of our organizational structure, identifying inefficiencies and legacy systems that may be holding Nuvatech back from reaching its full potential." Legacy systems. That phrase always made my stomach tighten. In corporate speak, legacy was rarely a compliment. "I see," I said, maintaining my professional demeanor despite the warning bells clanging in my head. "And how does compliance factor into this review?" Matt leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting to what I assume he thought was sympathetic concern. "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss with you, Erin. You've been with Nuvatech for 12 years now?" 14, I corrected. 14 years. That's incredible loyalty in today's market, he said, as if complimenting a dog for not running away. "You've built quite a traditional compliance framework during that time." The pause before traditional told me everything I needed to know. "Our compliance framework adheres to federal regulations and industry best practices," I said, my voice cooling several degrees. "It's not a matter of tradition, but of legal necessity." Matt nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely, absolutely. No one's questioning the importance of compliance, but in today's data-driven environment, we need to ask ourselves, is our current approach the most efficient? Could we be leveraging AI and automation to streamline these processes? "We already use automation where appropriate," I replied. "But regulatory compliance isn't just about checking boxes. Matt, it requires human judgment and expertise, especially in a field as complex and high-risk as biotechnology." He sighed, dropping the facade slightly. "Look, Erin, I'm going to be straight with you because I respect your contributions to Nuvatech. The truth is, we're looking at a significant restructuring of the compliance department. The executive team feels that much of what your team does manually could be handled by our new enterprise software suite, with oversight from our legal team on an as-needed basis. The subtext was clear: my role was being eliminated. "I see," I said again, my mind already racing ahead to implications, to contingencies, to the clause in my contract that I had insisted upon years ago when I first took on the director position. "And when will this restructuring take place?" "We're planning to implement changes starting next week. Of course, there will be a transition period where we'll need your expertise to train the system and transfer your knowledge." His tone suggested this was a generous offer rather than a final extraction of value before discarding me. "I understand," I said, surprised at how calm I sounded, despite the anger and betrayal burning in my chest. "Will there be a formal communication about this?" "Yes, at Monday's town hall meeting, but I wanted to give you a heads up personally. I value transparency." Matt's expression was that of someone who believed he was being kind by telling me I was about to be pushed off a cliff. "I appreciate that," I lied. "Is there anything else you need from me today?" "Not today. Let's touch base after Monday's announcement to discuss next steps." He glanced at his watch, already mentally moving on to his next victim. "Thanks for your understanding, Aaron. Change can be difficult, but it's necessary for growth." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further without letting my true feelings show. As soon as the call ended, I sat motionless, staring at my reflection in the black screen. 14 years. Countless late nights. Weekends sacrificed to urgent compliance issues, regulatory crises averted. And now I was legacy to be optimized away. But unlike most employees in my position, I had anticipated this moment. Not specifically, not with Matt as the harbinger of my professional demise, but as a possibility. In an industry where regulations could make or break a company, I had made myself indispensable, or so I thought. But I had also created a failsafe, a digital insurance policy embedded in the very systems that kept Nuvatech operational. I took a deep breath and opened my encrypted personal drive. There, nestled among vacation photos and tax documents, was a folder labeled Grandma's Lemon Bars Recipe. Inside was a comprehensive archive of every compliance system, federal certification, inspection record, and authentication code that Nuvatech relied upon. All of them, by design and by contract, tied to my name and authorization. I wasn't going to sabotage the company. That would be illegal and unethical. But I wasn't going to make it easy for them to discard me like outdated equipment either. My contract included a specific clause, Section 9B, that I had insisted upon when taking the director position in the event of involuntary termination. All federal licensing authorizations under my name would require revalidation within 48 hours. The company had agreed to this clause years ago, likely assuming it was a minor bureaucratic detail. They didn't understand that in the highly regulated world of biotechnology, revalidation wasn't a simple form submission. It required specific credentials, documented expertise, and established relationships with regulatory bodies, all of which I'd carefully cultivated over 14 years, and none of which could be transferred overnight to an AI system or a junior legal associate. I closed the folder and shut down my computer. It was time to prepare for what came next. The following day was eerily normal. No one treated me differently. No one gave me pitying looks. Either the news hadn't spread, or Matt had been unusually discreet. I spent the day quietly documenting my work processes, not for the handover Matt expected, but for my own records. I also began to notice small changes. I was removed from certain internal dashboards. My access to some systems was temporarily unavailable due to updates. And meeting invites that normally included me were mysteriously absent from my calendar. They were already erasing me, piece by piece, before the official announcement. By the end of the day, I had confirmed that most of my compliance oversight responsibilities had been quietly reassigned to 2 summer interns who had been kept on part-time and a junior legal assistant who once asked me if OSHA was a new project management software. I didn't protest. I didn't confront Matt or escalate to Gregory Winslow, our CEO, who was conveniently away on his annual golfing retreat in Scottsdale. Instead, I spent the weekend reviewing my contract. particularly Section 9B, and preparing for Monday's town hall. Monday morning arrived with the crisp chill of late October. I dressed with particular care, a charcoal gray suit that projected authority, a silk blouse in deep burgundy, my grandmother's pearl earrings for courage. If I was going to be professionally executed, I would face it with dignity. The town hall was scheduled for 9 a.m. in our largest conference room. I arrived at 8:50, taking a seat near the back where I could observe everyone's reactions. The room filled quickly with nervous energy and hushed conversations. At precisely 9 a.m., Matt strode in, followed by several members of the executive team, notably missing our CEO. "Good morning, everyone." Matt's voice boomed with manufactured enthusiasm. "Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules for this important announcement." What followed was 20 minutes of corporate doublespeak about strategic realignment, future-proofing our operations, and embracing digital transformation. I watched my colleagues' faces as understanding dawned. This wasn't about growth, it was about cuts. Finally, Matt got to the point. As part of our optimization effort, we've identified several departments that will undergo significant restructuring, starting with compliance. All eyes turned to me. I kept my expression neutral as Matt explained how my entire department's functions would be absorbed by an AI-powered compliance system with oversight from the legal team when necessary. My position as Director of Legal Compliance was being eliminated effective immediately. Erin has been a valuable member of the Nuvatech family. Matt continued, not looking at me. And we thank her for her 14 years of service. She'll be helping us transition her knowledge over the next 2 weeks. The room was uncomfortably silent. A few colleagues looked at me with genuine sympathy. Others studiously avoided eye contact, relieved it wasn't them on the chopping block. After the meeting, several people approached me with awkward condolences and promises to stay in touch that we both knew were empty. Matt caught up with me as I was walking back to my office. "Erin, if you have a moment, HR has some paperwork for you to sign." I nodded and followed him to a small conference room where a nervous HR representative waited with a manila folder. Inside was my termination agreement, a non-disclosure clause, and details of my meager severance package. "Do you have any questions?" the HR rep asked, clearly hoping I didn't. "Just one," I said calmly. "Could I get a printed copy of this for my records?" They seemed relieved by such a simple request. The HR rep printed the documents, and I signed each page without argument or emotion. The physical copy was important. It was documented proof that would trigger Section 9B of my contract. "Thank you for making this transition smooth," Matt said as I gathered my things. "I know change can be difficult, but I'm confident you'll find new opportunities that better align with your traditional skill set." I smiled for the first time that day. "I'm sure I will. Matt, change is necessary for growth, after all." He looked momentarily uncertain, perhaps detecting something in my tone, but quickly recovered with his practiced smile. "Exactly, that's the spirit." I spent the remainder of the day clearing out my office, downloading personal files, and saying goodbye to colleagues I actually respected. No one from the executive team checked on me. No one asked about transition plans for my extensive compliance knowledge. It was as if they truly believed a software system could replace 14 years of expertise overnight. I left the building at 5 p.m. sharp, carrying a single box of personal belongings. As I walked to my car, I didn't look back at the glass and steel building that had been my professional home for so long. Instead, I looked forward, counting down the hours until Section 9B would take effect. 48 hours. That's how long Nuvatech had to revalidate all federal licensing authorizations after my termination. Authorizations that were specifically tied to my credentials by design. Authorizations that governed everything from their supply chain to their distribution channels, from their manufacturing processes to their research protocols. I didn't need to do anything but wait. The system would do exactly what it was designed to do. The first sign that something was wrong came on Thursday morning when I received a text from Melissa in procurement. "What's happening with our supplier portal? Everything's locked down." I didn't respond. An hour later, my phone rang with a number I recognized as belonging to Thomas from IT security. I let it go to voicemail. His message was terse. Aaron, we're having issues with the compliance authentication protocols. Call me ASAP. I didn't. By noon, my email inbox was filling with increasingly urgent messages from various departments at Nuvatech. The compliance systems were locking people out. Shipments were being held at distribution centers because certification codes weren't validating. Research teams couldn't access crucial databases because the compliance API was rejecting their credentials. At 2:17 p.m., Matt called. I watched my phone vibrate on the kitchen counter as I sipped a glass of Pinot Noir. When it stopped, a text message appeared. Aaron, we need to talk. There are issues with the compliance systems. Please call me back urgently. I placed my phone in a drawer and spent the rest of the afternoon reading a novel I'd been meaning to get to for months. By Friday morning, the situation at Nuvatech had escalated from problematic to critical. I knew this not from direct communication, but from the LinkedIn status updates of my former colleagues. Vague tweets about technical difficulties from Nuvatech's official account, and most tellingly, a 7% drop in their stock price before the market had even been open for an hour. At 10 a.m., I received an email from Gregory Winslow himself, who had apparently cut his golfing retreat short. Aaron, I've just returned to find Nuvatech in a state of significant operational distress. It appears that our compliance systems are experiencing critical failures across all platforms. Matt has briefed me on recent organizational changes, and I must express my concern about the timing of these issues. I would appreciate a conversation at your earliest convenience to discuss how we might resolve these matters. Regards, Gregory Winslow, CEO, Nuvatech Dynamics. I waited until after lunch to reply. Gregory, I'm sorry to hear about the technical difficulties Nuvatech is experiencing. As you know, I am no longer employed by the company as of Monday's termination, so I am not in a position to address internal systems issues. If you're referring to the automatic deactivation of federal licensing authorizations as stipulated in Section 9B of my employment contract, I should note that this is functioning as designed and agreed upon by all parties. In the event of my involuntary termination, all such authorizations require revalidation within 48 hours. I'm sure your legal team can provide further guidance on next steps. Best regards, Aaron Gallagher. I attached a scanned copy of Section 9B, highlighted for convenience. The response came within minutes of a phone call from Gregory's personal cell. This time, I answered. Aaron. His voice was strained, attempting to maintain composure. Thank you for taking my call. I think there's been a misunderstanding that we need to clear up immediately. What misunderstanding would that be? Gregory? I kept my tone professional, almost pleasant. This situation with our compliance systems. We need your help to restore functionality. The company is facing significant operational challenges. I imagine it is, I replied. When you terminate the person responsible for maintaining regulatory compliance without a proper transition plan, challenges are to be expected. There was a pause, and I could almost hear him counting to 10 before speaking again. Aaron, I want to be clear that I was not consulted about the decision to eliminate your position. Had I been in town, things would have proceeded differently. That's unfortunate, I said. But the decision was made, and now we're all living with the consequences. What would it take to get you to help us resolve this situation? Gregory's voice had taken on an edge of desperation. We're talking about potential losses in the millions if we can't ship products or continue research. I'm aware of the potential impact, I said calmly. But I'm no longer a Nuvatech employee, so I'm not sure what you're asking me to do. Damn it, Aaron. His composure finally cracked. You know exactly what I'm asking. Whatever Matt did, whatever mistakes were made, we need to fix this. Name your price. I let the silence stretch for several seconds before responding. This isn't about price, Gregory. This is about 14 years of building systems that kept Nuvatech compliant and operational. Systems that were deemed legacy and obsolete. Systems that apparently cannot be replaced by an AI overnight. What do you want? His voice was quieter now, resigned. I don't want anything from Nuvatech. I've already accepted a position elsewhere. Where, the question was sharp, almost accusatory. Stradion Labs. I allowed myself a small smile, knowing he couldn't see it. Stradion was Nuvatech's main competitor. Another long silence followed. When Gregory spoke again, his tone had changed entirely. Is there any way we can work together to resolve this situation? As consultants, perhaps. The board is meeting in an emergency session this afternoon, and I need to present some kind of solution. I'm afraid not. Gregory, my new position begins on Monday, and I have preparation to do. I suggest you contact the Federal Regulatory Commission directly about expedited revalidation procedures. Though I should warn you, they typically take 4 to 6 weeks to process such requests, assuming all documentation is in order. 4 to 6. He cut himself off. Aaron, we don't have weeks. We have products worth millions sitting in warehouses that can't be shipped. We have research that can't proceed. We have investors calling for explanations. That sounds challenging, I said. Perhaps Matt can optimize a solution with his efficiency frameworks. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Gregory spoke, his voice ice cold. I see. Well, thank you for your time. Aaron, I'm sure we'll manage somehow. I'm sure you will. Good luck, Gregory. I ended the call and turned off my phone. Then I poured myself another glass of wine and went to sit on my balcony, watching the autumn leaves dance in the wind. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. The weekend passed quietly. I prepared for my new role at Stradion Labs, updated my LinkedIn profile, and ignored the mounting messages from former colleagues. By Sunday evening, Nuvatech's stock had dropped another 12%, and business news sites were beginning to run stories about unexplained operational issues at the company. Monday morning, I drove to Stradion Labs' headquarters in St. Louis, Paul, a sleek building overlooking the Mississippi River. My new office with glass doors and a stunning view of the water was ready for me. On my desk was a welcome package, a state-of-the-art laptop, and a handwritten note from Stradion's CEO. Aaron, we're thrilled to have you join our team as Executive Director of Regulatory Affairs and Compliance. Your expertise is exactly what Stradion needs to expand our market share. Looking forward to our meeting at 11 a.m., Sophia. I settled in, unpacking the few personal items I'd brought: a small plant, a framed photo of my nieces, and a yellow post-it note on which I'd written, I wasn't obsolete, I was the system. At 10:30 a.m., my new assistant knocked on my door. Ms. Gallagher, there's a call for you from Tricor Pharmaceuticals. They said it's urgent regarding a potential contract. Tricor had been one of Nuvatech's largest clients. By the end of my first week at Stradion, we had secured contracts with both Tricor Pharmaceuticals and Meridian Healthcare Solutions, two of Nuvatech's most valuable clients. My intimate knowledge of the regulatory landscape, combined with the relationships I had built over 14 years, made the transition seamless for these clients who couldn't afford to wait for Nuvatech to sort out their compliance issues. Meanwhile, Nuvatech's troubles continued to mount. Without valid compliance certifications, they couldn't ship products, continue critical research, or maintain their supply chain. The Federal Regulatory Commission had opened an investigation into their operations, citing concerning lapses in mandatory compliance protocols. 3 executives had resigned, including the chief operating officer who had initially supported Matt's restructuring plan. Speaking of Matt, his LinkedIn profile quietly updated 2 weeks after my departure. His title changed from Strategic Optimization Consultant to Associate Project Coordinator, a demotion so severe it might as well have come with a dunce cap. According to former colleagues who still kept in touch, he had been stripped of all decision-making authority and now spent his days compiling basic reports and sitting in meetings where no one asked for his input. As for me, I thrived at Stradion. My new title came with a salary increase of 40%, stock options, and most importantly, respect for my expertise. The compliance systems I designed for Stradion were even more robust than those at Nuvatech, incorporating lessons learned from my previous experience. And yes, they included certain protections tied to my credentials, not out of vindictiveness, but because I understood better than most how critical proper compliance management was to a biotech company's survival. 6 months after my departure from Nuvatech, I attended an industry conference in Chicago. As I was networking during the opening reception, I spotted Gregory Winslow across the room. Our eyes met briefly, and after a moment's hesitation, he made his way over to me. "Aaron." He nodded, his expression a complex mixture of respect and lingering resentment. "Congratulations on your success at Stradion. Their quarterly results were impressive." "Thank you, Gregory," I replied. "How are things at Nuvatech?" He took a sip of his drink before answering. "We've stabilized, finally got all our certifications revalidated last month, brought in a new compliance team, 5 people to replace what you managed alone." He paused. "Matt's gone, by the way. Turned out his optimization framework had some significant flaws." I nodded, unsurprised. "I'm glad to hear Nuvatech is recovering." "We lost Tricor and Meridian," he said, an edge in his voice, "along with about 30% of our market value." "Business is competitive," I replied simply. Gregory studied me for a moment. "You know, I always respected your work. Aaron, I should have paid more attention when Matt proposed his restructuring plan. That was my mistake." "We all make mistakes, Gregory. The important thing is learning from them." He nodded slowly. "Indeed. Well, I should circulate. Perhaps we'll cross paths again." "Perhaps we will." As he walked away, I felt no anger, no vindication, not even satisfaction. What had happened wasn't personal, it was simply business. Nuvatech had made a critical error in judgment by undervaluing specialized expertise in favor of trendy optimization buzzwords. They had learned an expensive lesson about the true meaning of mission-critical systems. I finished my drink and joined a group of Stradion colleagues, turning my attention to the future rather than the past. My new company was growing, my team was expanding, and my expertise was valued. I had moved on. That evening, back in my hotel room, I received an email notification about a business news article. Nuvatech Dynamics announces restructuring of executive team. I skimmed the content. Gregory was stepping down as CEO to be replaced by Dr. Amara Patel, a respected scientist with extensive regulatory experience. I smiled and closed my laptop. Perhaps Nuvatech had learned something after all. In the morning, I would fly back to Minnesota, to my apartment with the view of autumn trees, to my office with glass doors overlooking the Mississippi, to a company that understood that compliance wasn't just a box to check, but the foundation that allowed innovation to safely flourish. And somewhere in Minneapolis, in a building I no longer entered, a system I had designed continued to operate, now managed by 5 people instead of 1. A system that had proven, in its temporary absence, exactly how essential it was. A system that had shown everyone that sometimes what looks like legacy is actually foundation. I wasn't obsolete, I was the system, and now everyone knew it. Over the next 2 years, I built Stradion's compliance framework into the industry standard. We secured partnerships with 3 of the top 5 pharmaceutical companies and expanded into European markets with unprecedented speed, thanks to our reputation for regulatory excellence. My team grew from just me to a department of 12 specialists, each trained to understand that compliance wasn't a hindrance to innovation, but its necessary partner. Nuvatech eventually recovered, though they never regained their former market position. Dr. Patel's leadership brought much-needed stability, and from what I heard through industry channels, she had completely restructured their approach to compliance, creating redundancies and fail-safes that would prevent another catastrophic shutdown. Matt Delaney disappeared from the biotech industry entirely. Last I heard, he was selling real estate in Florida, a field where perhaps his particular brand of confidence might be an asset rather than a liability. As for me, I received the industry's Regulatory Excellence Award at the annual Bio-Innovation Conference, a recognition that would have been unthinkable during my years at Nuvatech, where compliance was viewed as a necessary evil rather than a competitive advantage. During my acceptance speech, I didn't mention Nuvatech or Matt or my experience being labeled legacy. Instead, I spoke about the future, about how proper regulatory compliance would be even more critical as biotechnology continued to advance, about the need for companies to value the expertise that kept them operational and their products safe. In an industry that saves lives, I concluded, following the rules isn't bureaucracy, it's responsibility. And those who understand the rules don't just enforce them, they use them to build foundations upon which innovation can safely thrive. The applause was gratifying, but not as gratifying as the knowledge that across the industry, companies were rethinking their approach to compliance, upgrading departments, increasing budgets, and recognizing that some functions couldn't be optimized away without severe consequences. Later that evening, at the reception following the awards ceremony, I was approached by a young woman who introduced herself as a recent graduate beginning her career in regulatory affairs. "Your speech was inspiring," she said. "I chose this field because I wanted to make a difference, but sometimes I worry that it's not as valued as research or marketing." I smiled, remembering my own early days. Let me tell you something that took me years to fully understand in our industry. Compliance isn't just about following rules. It's about creating the secure space where miracles can happen safely. Never let anyone tell you that your role is less essential than any other. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." As she walked away, I thought about how far I had come from that October day when Matt had called me legacy that needed to be cleaned up. The path hadn't been what I expected, but it had led me somewhere better, to a place where my expertise was recognized, where I could mentor the next generation, and where I understood my own worth in a way I never had before. That night, in my hotel room overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline, I opened my laptop to check email before bed. Among the usual messages was one that caught my attention, a notification from LinkedIn that Gregory Winslow had endorsed me for regulatory compliance and strategic leadership. I smiled at the irony but accepted the endorsement. Some lessons were expensive, but that didn't make them less valuable. In the end, what happened with Nuvatech wasn't about revenge or validation. It was simply the natural consequence of undervaluing critical expertise. Every company made its choices, and every choice had outcomes. I had chosen to build systems that protected both the company and my own position within it. Nuvatech had chosen to discard what they didn't understand, and now we were all living with the results of those choices. I closed my laptop and turned off the light, ready for whatever challenges tomorrow would bring. In the compliance world, there were always new regulations, new technologies, new risks to navigate, but I was no longer afraid of being obsolete. After all, I wasn't just following the system anymore, I was building it. The day after the awards ceremony, I returned to my office at Stradion to find a small package on my desk. Inside was a beautiful fountain pen in Stradion's signature blue, along with a note from Sophia, our CEO. "Aaron, congratulations on your well-deserved award. Your leadership has transformed not just Stradion, but how our entire industry approaches compliance. We're lucky to have you, and we know it. Sophia." I smiled, appreciating both the gift and the recognition. This was how it should be: expertise valued, contributions acknowledged, respect freely given. As I settled in to review the day's priorities, my assistant knocked on my open door. "There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she was quite insistent." Before I could ask who it was, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway, Dr. Amara Patel, Nuvatech's new CEO. "Aaron," she said with a slight nod, "I hope I'm not interrupting anything critical." "Amara," I replied, genuinely surprised. "Please, come in." My assistant discreetly withdrew, closing the door behind her. Amara took a seat across from me, her posture perfect as always. I had known her for years. We had served on industry committees together before she took the helm at Nuvatech. She was brilliant, principled, and not one for small talk. "Congratulations on your award," she said. "It was well-deserved." "Thank you. What brings you to Stradion? I can't imagine Sophia knows you're here." A small smile flickered across Amara's face. "No, this isn't an official visit. I wanted to speak with you directly, colleague to colleague." I leaned back in my chair, curious. "I'm listening." I've spent the past 18 months rebuilding what was broken at Nuvatech, she said, her voice matter of fact. The compliance systems, yes, but more importantly, the culture that allowed those systems to be devalued in the first place. I nodded but remained silent. It's been illuminating, she continued. When I took over, I found a company that had fundamentally misunderstood its own operational foundations. They thought compliance was a cost center rather than the framework that enabled everything else to function. A common misconception, I said neutrally. Indeed. She paused, studying me. What happened with Matt Delaney's optimization plan and your departure? It was a textbook case of organizational blindness. But I'm not here to discuss past mistakes. Then why are you here, Amara? She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder, placing it on my desk. I'm here because Nuvatech and Strateon are both being acquired by Genzyme International. The announcement goes public tomorrow morning. I felt my eyebrows rise in surprise. Genzyme was one of the largest pharmaceutical conglomerates in the world. Both companies. Yes, Genzyme wants Nuvatech's research pipeline and Strateon's compliance framework and market relationships. Together, under Genzyme's umbrella, they believe we can accomplish more than either company could alone. I opened the folder. Inside was a detailed organizational chart for the new combined entity. My eyes were immediately drawn to a position near the top. Executive Vice President, Global Regulatory Affairs and Compliance. They want you for this role, Amara said, watching my reaction. Your reputation in the industry, your proven track record, and quite frankly, the object lesson of what happened at Nuvatech, it all makes you the obvious choice. I closed the folder, my mind racing. And you? Where do you fit in this new structure? President of Research and Development, she replied, which means we would be peers, reporting directly to Genzyme's CEO. I took a moment to process this unexpected development. What about Sophia? Transitioning out after 6 months. Generous package, from what I understand. I nodded slowly. And you're supportive of me in this role. Amara's expression remained composed, but her eyes held a hint of amusement. I was the one who suggested you. Ironic, isn't it? The company that let you go now needs you back, albeit under a different banner. Very ironic, I agreed. And Gregory? Already gone. Part of the acquisition agreement. I tapped my fingers on the folder, thinking. Why tell me in person this could have been handled through proper channels once the acquisition was announced? Amara leaned forward slightly. Because I wanted you to hear it from someone who understands exactly what happened and why it matters. What Nuvatech did to you was inexcusable, a failure of leadership and vision. But this acquisition represents a chance to build something better, something that won't make the same mistakes. Her sincerity was evident, and I found myself appreciating her directness. I'll need time to consider this. Of course, the official offer will come through Genzyme next week. She stood to leave, then paused. One more thing, Aaron. I had our team analyze what happened when your compliance systems went down after your departure. It was brilliant, elegant, even. You built in protections that were invisible until they were needed, and you did it all within the bounds of your contract and federal regulations. I remained carefully neutral. I simply designed systems that functioned as they were supposed to. A knowing smile crossed Amara's face. Exactly. And that's precisely why Genzyme wants you. They understand that in our industry, compliance isn't just following rules, it's architecting systems that protect everyone involved. After she left, I sat for a long time, contemplating the folder and what it represented. The wheel had turned full circle, bringing me back to Nuvatech in a way but on entirely different terms, not as the undervalued legacy employee, but as an executive whose expertise had been proven essential in the most dramatic way possible. I finally opened my laptop and composed an email to Sophia, requesting a meeting to discuss an urgent matter. Whatever I decided about Genzyme's offer, I owed her the courtesy of transparency. As I sent the email, my phone chimed with a news alert. Genzyme International stock surges on acquisition rumors. The corporate world moved quickly. and by this time tomorrow, everything would change again. But this time, I wouldn't be caught unprepared. This time, I knew exactly what I was worth. And somewhere in Florida, perhaps Matt Delaney would see the news and finally understand what his optimization framework had failed to account for. Some roles couldn't be reduced to efficiency metrics or replaced by algorithms. Some expertise was the foundation upon which everything else was built. I smiled as I imagined his reaction, but only for a moment. My focus needed to be on the future now, on what I could build with this new opportunity, on how I could ensure that what happened at Nuvatech never happened again at Genzyme or any company under my influence. The compliance systems I would design for a global conglomerate would need to be even more robust, more elegant, and yes, more protected than before. Not out of fear or vengeance, but because that's what excellence required, because that's what kept patients safe, research valid, and operations legal. I glanced at the yellow Post-it note still stuck to the corner of my computer monitor. I wasn't obsolete, I was the system. Perhaps it was time for a new note, a new mantra for this next chapter. I am not just the system, I am its architect. 3 months later, I stood in my new office at Genzyme International's headquarters in Boston, overlooking the harbor. The merger had proceeded smoothly, and I now led a global team of 65 compliance professionals across 3 continents. My first act as executive vice president had been to create a comprehensive compliance framework that integrated the best elements of Stradion's system with new protections designed for Genzyme's global operations. My second had been to establish a mandatory training program for all executives on the critical role of regulatory compliance in the pharmaceutical industry. The CEO himself had attended the first session, sending a clear message throughout the organization about the value placed on this function. We don't see compliance as a constraint, he had told the gathered executives. We see it as the foundation that makes innovation possible. Words I had longed to hear throughout my career. As I unpacked the last of my personal items in my new office, I came across that yellow Post-it note with my old mantra. I smiled, remembering how far I had come since those uncertain days after Matt's fateful Zoom call. I didn't need the reminder anymore. I placed it in a small keepsake box along with other mementos from my professional journey, my first business card from Nuvatech, the program from the Regulatory Excellence Awards, the fountain pen from Sophia. In their place, I put a new note on my monitor, one that looked toward the future rather than the past. Build systems that protect everyone. Because that's what compliance was really about, not rules for rules' sake, but safeguards that allowed science to advance without causing harm. It had taken a dramatic fall and rise for the industry to recognize this truth. But now that it had, I was positioned to ensure it wouldn't be forgotten again. My phone buzzed with a message from Amara. Committee meeting in 10 minutes, bringing the research team's proposals for the new oncology pipeline. I gathered my materials and headed to the conference room, ready to help shape the future of medicine in my own essential way, not from the shadows of a back office, but from the executive suite where decisions were made. The system hadn't just recognized my value, it had elevated it. And in return, I would continue to build systems that worked invisible until needed, fundamental always.